The hallway was silent. 47th floor. Kang Industries, North American headquarters. 11 minutes past 9 p.m. Everyone had gone home. Everyone except Min Jae. And the woman waiting behind the door at the end of the halls. And one 5-year-old girl in a red dress who had no business being on the 47th floor at 11 minutes past 9 on a Thursday evening. But was there anyway? Standing in the middle of the corridor, both arms out, blocking the door. Min Jae stopped walking. He looked at Soleil. She looked at him. Neither of them moved. Behind the door, a sound. Zovd. Someone adjusting their position. Waiting. Soleil did not look at the door. She kept her eyes on Min Jae. Both arms still out. Her expression was not frightened. It was not dramatic. It was the specific, complete certainty of a child who has decided something and has placed her whole small body between a man she loves and the thing behind the door. Min Jae looked at his daughter. Not his biological daughter. Not yet. Not on paper. But in the specific way that mattered. The way that had been true since a Tuesday evening 18 months ago when a 5-year-old had sat on his kitchen floor and shown him a drawing of 3 people standing at a window and said we were always going to be this. He looked at her. He did not move toward the door. He crouched to her level. He looked at her eyes. He said very quietly, "Tell me." Soleil lowered her arms. She reached into the pocket of her red dress. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. She held it out. He took it. He unfolded it. He looked at what was on it. The hallway was completely silent. Behind the door, another soft sound. Still waiting. Min Jae read the paper. He read it twice. He looked at Soleil. Something moved through his expression that had no clean name. Something that was made of multiple things simultaneously. The understanding of what he had almost walked into. The understanding of who had been building it. The understanding that a 5-year-old had been the one to stop it. He folded the paper. He put it in his jacket pocket. He stood up. He looked at the door. He looked at Soleil. He said, "How long have you known?" Soleil looked at her shoes. "Long enough." He looked at her. "Why tonight?" She looked up at him. Because tonight was the last night it could be stopped. The corridor was very quiet. Somewhere in the building, a ventilation system hummed. Manhattan blazed 47 floors below, indifferent and enormous. Min Jae looked at the door. He looked at his daughter. He said, "Okay." He turned around. He walked back toward the elevator. Soleil walked beside him. Her small hand found his. He held it. They walked. Behind the closed door at the end of the corridor, the woman waiting inside finally understood that nobody was coming. "Before I tell you everything, before I take you back to the beginning and show you how a 5-year-old girl came to be standing in a corporate corridor at 9 p.m. with both arms blocking a door. Subscribe to Afro K Diaries right now if you are new here. Drop your city and the time it is where you are in the comments. Because what is behind that door and who put it there and how Soleil found out and what was on that piece of paper will break your heart and rebuild it completely. Stay with me. It began the way most important things began in Soleil's experience. Not with drama, with something small that most people would have filed away and forgotten. A Tuesday evening, 6 weeks before the corridor. Min Jae was working late. This was not unusual. He worked late on Tuesdays sometimes when the Seoul office needed answers before their Wednesday morning, and the time difference made evening the only option. Zara had brought dinner to the office. This had happened 3 times before and had become its own small thing, the kind of thing that happened in a relationship that had stopped being new and had become real. She brought the food. She brought Soleil. They ate in his office, with the Manhattan night blazing through the floor-to-ceiling windows and Soleil drawing at the small table in the corner that had appeared in Min Jae's office approximately 2 months after she started coming here, and that nobody had commented on because some things did not need commentary. At 8:15, Zara took a call in the corridor. Her sister in Atlanta. The specific kind of call that started as 5 minutes and became 40. Min Jae was on a conference call of his own, his voice low and measured on the Seoul line. Soleil was drawing. At 8:23, a woman appeared in the office doorway. She knocked. She saw Min Jae on the call. She saw Soleil at the corner table. She smiled. Soleil looked up. The woman was Korean. Mid-30s. The specific polished quality of someone who understood that appearance was a form of strategy. Her name was Seo Yeon. She was Min Jae's new head of acquisitions. She had been with the company for 4 months. She had a reputation for precision and results and a specific warmth that made people trust her immediately. She looked at Soleil. She said, softly so as not to disturb Min Jae's call, "You must be Soleil." Soleil looked at her. The 4-second assessment. The head tilt. The complete, focused attention. "Yes," Soleil said. "I've heard so much about you," Seo Yeon smiled. "Your drawings are famous around here." Soleil looked at her drawing. She looked back at Seo Yeon. She said nothing. Seo Yeon waited for the response a child usually gave to a compliment. It did not come. She kept her smile perfectly in place. "I just need to leave something for Min Jae." She moved to the desk. "I'll be out of your way." She placed a folder on the desk. She looked at Min Jae on his call. She looked at Soleil. She smiled again. She left. Soleil watched the doorway for 4 seconds after she disappeared. Then she looked at the folder on the desk. Then she looked at her drawing. She picked up her pencil. She did not draw what she had been drawing before. She drew something new. She did not show the drawing to anyone that evening. She put it at the back of the sketchbook. She went home. She went to bed. She lay in the dark and thought about what she had seen. Not the folder. Not the smile. The moment before the smile. The half-second before Seo Yeon had looked up and seen her sitting in the corner. The half-second when she thought the office was empty except for Min Jae on his call. The specific expression on her face in that half-second. Before the performance began, Soleil had seen it. She had seen it clearly. She had been drawing and her eyes were on her paper, and she had looked up exactly at the wrong moment for Seo Yeon and the exactly right moment for the truth. She lay in the dark. She thought about what a face looked like when it did not know anyone was watching. She had drawn it already. She needed to understand it. Welcome to Afro Korean. Drop a yellow heart in the comments if you have ever seen someone's real face for half a second before they knew you were looking. You know exactly what Soleil saw. Drop your city. Drop the time it is where you are. Because what Soleil saw in that half-second is what changes everything in this story. Stay with me. Zara noticed the new drawing 4 days later. She was not looking for it. She found it when she picked up the sketchbook to move it from the kitchen table to the counter, and it fell open at the back. She looked at the drawing. A woman in a doorway. The office doorway. She recognized the doorway from the 3 times she had brought dinner to the 47th floor. The woman in the drawing was Korean. Elegant. Her smile was perfectly rendered. The way Soleil rendered everything, with the specific observational accuracy of someone who drew what they actually saw rather than what they expected to see. The smile was perfect, but Zara looked at the drawing for a longer moment. Something about it. She looked at the eyes. They were not looking at what the smile was for. They were looking at something else entirely. Something on the desk. Something the smile was not for. Zara stood at the kitchen counter, holding the sketchbook. She heard Soleil in the bathroom. She heard the tap running. She looked at the drawing. She looked at the eyes. She thought about the Tuesday evening. She had been in the corridor for 40 minutes on the Atlanta call. She had come back to find Min Jae still on his Seoul call and Soleil drawing. She had not asked what had happened while she was gone because nothing appeared to have happened. She looked at the drawing. She looked at the eyes. She put the sketchbook on the counter. She waited for Soleil. Soleil came into the kitchen. She saw the sketchbook. She saw where it was open. She sat down at the kitchen table. Zara sat across from her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Zara said, "Who is this?" Soleil folded her hands on the table. "The woman who came into the office Tuesday. Seo Yeon." "Yes." Zara looked at the drawing. You drew her eyes differently from her smile. Soleil looked at the drawing. "Yes." "Why?" "Because they were doing different things." Zara kept her voice even. Her eyes were looking at the desk, she said, at the folder she brought. Soleil shook her head slightly. Zara looked at her. "Not the folder," Soleil said. "Then what?" Soleil looked at the drawing. "Min Jae's phone," she said. She was looking at Min Jae's phone. The kitchen was very quiet. Zara looked at the drawing. Min Jae's phone sat on his desk every evening when he was on a call. His personal phone, not the company phone. The one with the access codes. The one with the private correspondence. The one with everything. Something cold arrived in Zara's chest. Not panic. Something colder than panic. "She was smiling at me," Soleil said, but her eyes were on the phone the whole time. Zara looked at her daughter. "Are you sure?" Soleil looked at her mother. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Zara did not tell Min Jae that night. She sat with it for 24 hours. Not because she doubted Soleil. She had never doubted Soleil about anything Soleil had observed directly. She sat with it because she understood what it meant to tell a man that the woman he had just promoted to head of acquisitions was looking at his phone with eyes that were doing something different from her smile. It was the kind of thing that could sound like jealousy. It was the kind of thing that could sound like a mother protecting territory. It was the kind of thing that required more than a child's drawing. Even a drawing by Soleil. She sat with it for 24 hours. She thought carefully. She made a decision. She would watch. She would gather. She would be certain before she said anything. She had raised Soleil on the principle that what you knew and what you could show were different things and both mattered. She applied this now. Min Jae noticed something was different on Wednesday evening. He could not have named it. He had learned over 18 months to read Zara the way she read everything, carefully, patiently, without rushing the conclusion. She was present. She was warm. She was also carrying something she had not given him yet. He did not push. He had learned that Zara's timing was always right. She said things when she was ready to say them and not before, and the things she said were always worth waiting for. He waited. Soleil drew at the kitchen table. She drew the office, the 47th floor, the corridor, the door at the end. She drew it from different angles. She was still understanding something. She would know when she was ready. On Thursday of that week, Seo Yeon asked Min Jae to stay late. A soul matter. Urgent documentation. Something requiring his personal authorization before Friday morning Korea time. Min Jae looked at the request. He said yes. He texted Zara. Zara read the text. She sat with it for a moment. She called Aunt Rosa. She arranged for Soleil to be dropped at the office at 8:30. She told herself she was doing this because she wanted to bring dinner. She told herself other things too. She was honest enough to know which ones were true. She told Soleil in the car, "We are bringing dinner to Min Jae." Soleil sat in the back seat with her sketchbook. She looked up. She looked at her mother's face in the rearview mirror. She looked back at her sketchbook. She said, "Okay." She drew the whole car ride. Not landscapes. Not people she knew. She drew a door. The same door she had been drawing all week. The door at the end of the 47th floor corridor. She drew it from outside. She drew what was on the other side. Not from seeing, from understanding. She had been assembling this for 6 days. Tonight she was going to see if she was right. They arrived at the Kang Industries building at 8:20. The lobby was quiet. The night security guard knew them. He waved them through. The elevator to the 47th floor. The doors opened. The corridor. Quiet. Most offices dark. Min Jae's office, light at the far end. And beside it, one door down, another light. Seo Yeon's office. Zara looked at the two lit offices. She shifted the dinner bag. She walked toward Min Jae's office. Soleil walked beside her. Halfway down the corridor, Soleil stopped. Zara took 2 more steps before she realized. She turned. Soleil was standing still. She was looking at Seo Yeon's office door. Not at Min Jae's. At Seo Yeon's. Zara said quietly, "Soleil." Soleil did not move. She was looking at the gap beneath the door. The light. And underneath the light, the faint shadow of someone moving. Not at a desk. Moving around the office. The specific movement of someone doing something they were doing quickly. Zara looked at the gap beneath the door. She looked at her daughter. Soleil looked up at her. Her expression said everything. Zara stood in the corridor of the 47th floor of Kang Industries with a dinner bag in her hand. She thought about the drawing. The eyes that were not looking where the smile was for. Min Jae's phone. The personal access codes. 4 months since the promotion. 4 months of Seo Yeon being in this building. 4 months of Seo Yeon being precise and warm and results-oriented and trusted. Zara made a decision. She handed Soleil the dinner bag. She pointed at Min Jae's office. She said very quietly, "Take this to Min Jae, tell him I went to the bathroom." Soleil looked at her mother. She looked at Seo Yeon's door. She said, "Mamo." Zara crouched to her level. She held her daughter's gaze. "I need to know," she said. "Go to Min Jae, I'll be 2 minutes." Soleil looked at her for a long moment. Then she took the dinner bag. She walked to Min Jae's office. Zara stood up. She turned to Seo Yeon's door. She knocked. Inside the office, movement stopped. A beat of silence. Then the door opened. Seo Yeon looked at Zara. Her smile arrived in exactly the correct amount of time. Zara, warmth, perfectly calibrated. I didn't know you were coming tonight. Zara looked at the office. Seo Yeon was standing slightly away from the desk. Between Zara and the desk, the computer screen was locked. The desk was clear. Too clear. The specific clarity of a surface that has just been cleared. Zara looked at the waste paper basket beside the desk. A single piece of paper. Folded. Recently placed. She looked at Seo Yeon. She said, I brought dinner for Min Jae. I just wanted to say hello. Seo Yeon smiled. Of course, he's just next door. I know. Zara did not move toward the door. Long week. Always, Seo Yeon moved slightly toward the door, the specific movement of someone who wanted the conversation to happen somewhere else. But good. The sole documentation is almost ready. Zara looked at the desk. She looked at the waste paper basket. She looked at the paper inside it. She smiled. She said, I'll let you finish. She left. She walked to the bathroom at the end of the corridor. She stood inside for 30 seconds. She pressed her hands against the cold sink. She looked at herself in the mirror. She breathed. Then she went to Min Jae's office. Min Jae was at his desk. Soleil was at the corner table. Not drawing. Sitting with her sketchbook closed in her lap. Watching the door. She looked at Zara when she came in. She looked at her mother's face. She read it. She opened her sketchbook. She picked up her pencil. She drew the waste paper basket. She drew the folded paper inside it. Min Jae looked up from his documents. He looked at Zara. She looked at him. She smiled. She unpacked the dinner. She said nothing. Not yet. She needed to see the paper first. They stayed for an hour. Min Jae worked. Zara sat. Soleil drew. At 9:15, Min Jae said the sole documentation was done. He began closing down his computer. He stood. He stretched. He looked at Zara. Ready. 1 second. Zara picked up the dinner bag. I'll just put these containers in the kitchen. She walked out of the office. She walked past the kitchen. She walked to Seo Yeon's office. The light was off. Seo Yeon had gone. Zara opened the door. She went to the waste paper basket. She reached in. She took the folded paper. She unfolded it. She stood in the dark office and read it. She read it once. She read it again. She folded it. She put it in her pocket. She went to the kitchen. She put the containers in the kitchen. She walked back to Min Jae's office. Soleil was waiting in the corridor. She had not gone back into the office. She was standing in the corridor with her sketchbook under her arm and her eyes on her mother's face. Zara looked at her daughter. Soleil looked at her mother's pocket. She understood. She said very quietly, "How long?" Zara shook her head slightly. "Not here. Not now." Soleil nodded. They went back into the office. Min Jae was putting on his coat. He looked at them both. Something in the air of the corridor had changed, and he had been reading Zara long enough to know when something had shifted. He looked at Zara. He looked at Soleil. He said, "What?" Zara picked up Soleil's bag. She smiled. "Nothing," she said. "Let's go home." Drop a yellow heart right now for Zara Williams, who stood in a dark office and read a piece of paper and folded it and put it in her pocket and walked back down the corridor without showing a single thing on her face. That is the specific strength of a woman who knows that the moment of confrontation requires preparation, not impulse. Drop your city. Tell me, what would you have done if you found that paper? Would you have gone straight to Min Jae? Or would you have done what Zara did? Stay with me, because what is on that paper is coming. She read it again at the kitchen table at midnight. Min Jae was asleep. Soleil was asleep. The apartment was quiet. Zara sat at the kitchen table under the lamp and read the paper. It was not a contract. It was not a document. It was a handwritten note to someone whose name was initials only. Jae. 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph was about timing, about a window, about a specific Thursday evening when Min Jae would be alone in the office after 9, about a door that would be unlocked, about what would be found, about what could be photographed. Zara read this paragraph twice. She understood what it meant. She understood the setup, the sole documentation that was urgent and required Min Jae to stay late. The specific timing, the unlocked door, the thing that would be found. She moved to the second paragraph. The second paragraph was shorter. It was about Min Jae specifically, about what kind of man he was, about how he responded to certain situations, about how the discovery would be staged, about what Seo Yeon intended to walk into. Not a theft, not corporate espionage. A trap. A specific, carefully constructed trap designed to put Min Jae in a position where a choice would be forced. Not his company. Something else. Something personal. Zara read the second paragraph 3 times. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time. She thought about 4 months of Seo Yeon being precise and warm and results-oriented. She thought about 4 months of proximity, of building trust, of being indispensable. She thought about the specific patience required to build something for 4 months. She thought about what kind of person had that patience. She thought about what kind of person would use it for this. She folded the paper. She looked at the kitchen, the apartment, the life that had been built here, the Tuesday evenings, the pillow on the left side of the couch, the drawings on the refrigerator. She thought about Soleil drawing a door for 6 days, drawing it from different angles, drawing what was behind it before she knew for certain. She thought about her daughter standing in the corridor with both arms out. The specific image of it. A 5-year-old in a red dress blocking a door. The last line of defense between a man she loved and something she had spent 6 days understanding. Zara put the paper in the inside pocket of her bag. She turned off the kitchen lamp. She went to bed. She lay in the dark beside Min Jae. She listened to him breathe. She thought for a long time. She made a plan. She did not tell Min Jae. Not yet. She needed one more thing first. She needed to understand JH. The initials on the note. The person Seo Yeon had been writing to. The person who was supposed to be waiting behind that door on Thursday evening. She had 4 days. She went to Min Jae's office the next morning. Not to see him. She went when he was in a board meeting. She asked the building receptionist about visitor logs. She said she had left something in the building 3 weeks earlier and was trying to trace when she had been there. The receptionist was helpful. She looked up the visitor logs for the relevant period. Zara asked if she could look at the screen. The receptionist turned it toward her. Zara scanned the names. 3 weeks of visitors. She found what she was looking for on the second page. A name that arrived 3 times in 4 weeks. Each time in the evening. Each time on the 37th floor. Not the 47th. The 37th. Acquisitions. Seo Yeon's floor. The name was not JH. But underneath the name in the company column was a firm. A name Zara recognized. A name that belonged to a man Min Jae had been in a legal dispute with for 2 years over a failed joint venture. A man who had reason to want leverage over Min Jae. A man who had every reason to be the person at the end of a corridor on a Thursday evening. Zara thanked the receptionist. She walked to the elevator. She stood in the elevator and breathed. She had what she needed. She called Aunt Rosa. She said, "I need you to take Soleil to the office Thursday evening, around 8:30. Aunt Rosa said, "Is everything all right?" Zara looked at the elevator doors. "It will be," she said. Thursday came. Min Jae texted at 6 p.m. Sole documentation, staying late. Zara read the text. She texted back, "I'll send dinner with Soleil." Min Jae replied immediately, "You don't have to." She looked at the message. She typed, "I know." She called Aunt Rosa. She told her to bring Soleil at 8:30. She said one more thing. She said, "Tell her to bring the drawings." Aunt Rosa and Soleil arrived at 8:27. In the lobby, Aunt Rosa looked at Soleil. Soleil looked at the elevator. She looked at Aunt Rosa. "She told you to bring the drawings," Soleil said. "Yes." Soleil looked at the elevator. "She knows." "Yes." Soleil nodded. She went to the elevator. Aunt Rosa watched her go. She stood in the lobby for a moment. Then she sat in a lobby chair. She would wait. Soleil stepped out of the elevator on the 47th floor. The corridor. Quiet. The familiar layout. Min Jae's office lit at the far end. And beside it, one door down, dark. Seo Yeon's office dark tonight. Seo Yeon was not in her office tonight. Soleil looked at the door at the end of the corridor. Not Min Jae's door. The other door. The one past it. The conference room. The light underneath it was barely visible. Someone had turned the main light off. Someone was using only a desk lamp inside. Someone was waiting. Soleil stood in the corridor. She looked at Min Jae's office. She looked at the conference room door. She understood the layout completely. Min Jae would finish his sole documentation. He would stand up. He would walk out of his office. He would walk down the corridor toward the elevator. He would pass the conference room. The door would open. Whatever was staged inside would be staged for exactly that moment. Soleil looked at her sketchbook. She opened it to the back. She looked at the drawings she had made all week. The door. The corridor. The layout. The note her mother had left on the kitchen table this morning. Not a long note. 3 words. Trust what you see. Soleil closed the sketchbook. She walked to the center of the corridor. She stood between Min Jae's office door and the conference room. She put both arms out. She waited. Min Jae came out of his office at 9:11 p.m. He was putting his phone in his pocket. He was thinking about the sole documentation and whether the morning call would need to be moved and what time Zara's alarm was set for. He walked down the corridor. He looked up. He stopped. A 5-year-old girl in a red dress, standing in the center of the corridor. Both arms out. looking at him. He stopped walking. He looked at her. He looked at the conference room door. He crouched to her level. He looked at her eyes. He said very quietly, "Tell me." She told him. Not everything. Not all at once. She reached into the pocket of her red dress. She pulled out the folded paper. She held it out. He took it. He unfolded it. He read it. He went completely still. He read it again. He looked at the conference room door. He understood what was behind it. He understood the setup, the sole documentation that had required him to stay late, the specific timing, the conference room, the person waiting inside. He understood all of it in the specific way that things become clear when you have all the pieces and finally see how they connect. He understood something else too. 4 months of Seo Yeon being precise and warm and results-oriented. 4 months of building access. 4 months of patience. He looked at the paper. He looked at Soleil. He said, "How long have you known?" "Long enough." "Why tonight?" "Because tonight was the last night it could be stopped." He stood up. He looked at the door. Something moved through his expression. Not anger exactly. Something colder and cleaner than anger. The specific quality of someone who has been patient for 18 months and has just understood that the patience was not misplaced. He looked at Soleil. He said, "Okay." He turned around. He walked back toward his office. Not to the conference room. Not to the confrontation. Back to his office. To his phone. To his corporate attorney. To the security director. To the access logs. To 4 months of evidence that had been accumulating without anyone asking the right questions. He made 3 calls from his office with Soleil sitting in the corner with her sketchbook. Drawing. Calmly. The way she drew everything that mattered. The conference room was not empty. Behind the door, a man had been waiting for 40 minutes. A man whose initials were JH. A man whose company name appeared in the visitor logs of the 37th floor 3 times in 4 weeks. A man who had spent 2 years trying to find leverage over Kang Min Jae and had found it. He believed in a woman with a perfect smile and patient eyes and 4 months of access. He waited. He checked his phone. 9:15. 9:20. 9:25. Nobody came. At 9:30, the conference room door opened from the outside. Not Min Jae. The security director. 2 members of building security. The corporate attorney on a phone that was already recording. The man looked at the security director. He looked at the recording phone. He understood. He had been waiting for leverage. What had arrived instead was consequences. Seo Yeon was at her apartment when Min Jae called. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm, perfectly calibrated. The specific warmth of someone who had not yet understood that it was over. Min Jae said 3 sentences. He said the conference room was occupied by security. He said the access logs had been pulled. He said she should contact a lawyer before Monday. He ended the call. He looked at Soleil. She was drawing. Still calm. Still certain. He sat across from her at the corner table. He had been sitting at this desk for 4 years. In all that time, in all the decisions and negotiations and deals and disputes, nothing had required him to say what he was about to say. He looked at this 5-year-old. Soleil. She looked up. You stood in that corridor with both arms out. She nodded. You were there alone for how long? Since 8:42. 29 minutes. She looked at her drawing. I knew you'd come out around 9. He looked at the corridor outside the glass office wall. He thought about a 5-year-old standing alone in a corporate corridor at 8:42 p.m. with both arms out. He thought about what she had been protecting. Not the company. Not the deal. Not the documentation. Him. The life they had built. The Tuesday evenings. The kitchen table. The pillow on the left side of the couch. The 3 people standing at the kitchen window. She had stood with both arms out for 29 minutes, protecting all of it. He looked at her. He said, why didn't you tell me sooner, before tonight? She put her pencil down. She looked at him with those eyes. Because you trusted her, she said. You were proud of what she had done for the company, the sole deal, the acquisition's results, all of it. He was quiet. If I had said something earlier, you would have had to choose between what I was saying and what you had decided about her. She picked up her pencil. The evidence wasn't ready. I needed Mama to find the paper. I needed the visitor logs. I needed all of it to be there before I said anything. He looked at her. So you waited. I waited until there was enough truth around you that one more piece of it would land. The office was very quiet. He looked at this child. He thought about the Tuesday on the stairwell. The sad hands. The soup. 18 months of Soleil drawing his life before it became his life. He thought about what it meant. What it had always meant. He said very quietly, I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you and your mother never have to stand in a corridor alone. Soleil looked at him. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she turned to a page at the back of her sketchbook. She had drawn it 6 days ago. She held it up. Min Jae looked at the drawing. The corridor. The 47th floor. A small girl in a red dress with both arms out. And behind her, slightly out of focus, the way she drew things that had not happened yet. A man walking away from the door. Walking toward the elevator. Walking back toward the life he was supposed to have. Soleil had drawn it 6 days before she stood in that corridor. She had drawn it before she was certain. She had drawn it because she was going to make it happen. He looked at the drawing. He looked at her. He said, you drew this before tonight. I draw what I know will happen, she said, and then I make sure it does. Bestie, I need you to stop everything right now and tell me something in the comments. Has a child ever done something for you that you did not ask for and did not expect, and that turned out to be the most important thing anyone had ever done? Drop it in the comments. Drop your city. Drop a yellow heart for Soleil, who drew herself in that corridor 6 days before she stood there. And who stood there for 29 minutes alone because she had already decided she was going to make the drawing true. Subscribe to Afro K Diaries if you haven't already. Let's finish this. The investigation moved quietly. Seo Yeon Park's access logs told a story that 4 months of performance had been designed to prevent anyone from reading. The credential access. The document version histories. The visitor logs. The handwritten note. The man in the conference room who had spent 2 years looking for leverage and had found instead a corporate attorney with a recording phone. It all assembled into something that required no interpretation. Quiet. Complete. The kind of evidence that meticulous people left when they were meticulous about the wrong things. Min Jae handled it the way he handled everything. Directly. Without noise. He met with his board. He presented the evidence. He made 3 decisions. The first was about Seo Yeon. The second was about the joint venture dispute that had produced JH. The third was about his own company's security protocols that had allowed 4 months of access without triggering any alert. All 3 decisions were executed before the following Monday. None of them made the financial press. Some things were better handled quietly. On the Saturday after it was over, Min Jae arrived at the apartment at 10. He had the pastries from the bakery on Amsterdam Avenue. He had something else too. He sat at the kitchen table. Zara was at the counter with coffee. Soleil was on the kitchen floor with her sketchbook. He said, "I need to say something to both of you." Soleil looked up. Zara turned from the counter. He looked at Zara. "You found the paper, you read it, you made a plan. You sent Soleil to the office instead of coming yourself because you understood that what Soleil would do would stop it better than anything I could have done if you had come to me first." Zara held her coffee. Her expression showed the specific composed quality of a woman receiving something accurately. "You did all of that," he said, "without saying anything that would have made me react before I was ready." He looked at Soleil. "And you stood in that corridor alone for 29 minutes. Soleil looked at her drawing. "I wasn't alone," she said. He looked at her. "You were there." She pointed at the drawing. The drawing she had made 6 days before. The man walking away from the door. "I was already in the drawing," she said. "When you draw something, you're already in it. It doesn't feel alone." He looked at this child. He had been looking at her for 18 months. He had understood from the first Tuesday that she was not ordinary. He had not understood the full extent of what that meant. He understood it now. He reached into his jacket pocket. He placed something on the kitchen table. Zara looked at it. Soleil looked at it. Not a ring. A key. A key to the apartment on the 47th floor. The private apartment he had in the building. The one that nobody used. The one he had been thinking about for 6 months. Zara looked at the key. She looked at him. He said, "I would like this to be one address." She was very still. "Not the building address," he said, "us, one address." Zara looked at the key. She thought about Tuesday evenings. She thought about the pillow on the left side of the couch. She thought about soup and pastries and 47 floors, and a corridor where her daughter had stood with both arms out for 29 minutes. She thought about what it meant to have decided already. She picked up the key. She turned it in her fingers. She looked at him. She said, "Soleil." Soleil was already drawing. "I already drew it," Soleil said without looking up. Zara looked at Min Jae. He looked at her. She said, "Yes." Soleil held up the sketchbook. On the page were 3 figures. Standing at a window. A man, a woman, a small girl between them. Below them, a key on a kitchen table. And above them, in Soleil's certain handwriting. One address, always. Zara looked at the drawing. She pressed her hand over her mouth. Min Jae looked at the drawing. He looked at Soleil. She was already turning to the next page. Already drawing the next thing. Already 3 weeks ahead of all of them. He said, "When did you draw that?" She turned the page without looking up. "The day Mama found the paper," she said. "I knew she would say yes." He looked at Zara. Zara looked at him. She was still pressing her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were the good kind of wet. He reached across the table. He took her other hand. She looked at their joined hands. She looked at the key still in her fingers. She looked at her daughter drawing at the kitchen floor. She thought about the stairwell. The sad hands. The soup. The first Tuesday. The drawing on the first day. She thought about what it meant to have been known before you knew yourself. She thought about a 5-year-old who drew what was going to happen before it happened, and then stood in a corridor for 29 minutes alone to make sure it did. She thought about what Grace had said. Her grandmother, years ago, in the kitchen in Georgia. She had said, the people who are meant for you will show you who they are before you understand what you're seeing. She had not understood that then. She understood it now. She looked at Min Jae. She said, one address. He looked at her. One address, he said. From the kitchen floor, Soleil said, without looking up, finally. And that is where this story ends. Not in a corridor on the 47th floor. Not in a corporate investigation. Not with two people who built something for 4 months, finding out that everything they built was recorded by access logs. But in a kitchen on a Saturday morning. With pastries from Amsterdam Avenue. And a key on the kitchen table. And a drawing of 3 people standing at a window. And one word written above them in a 5-year-old certain handwriting. Always. Soleil had stood in that corridor with both arms out for 29 minutes. She had stood there because she had drawn herself standing there. She had drawn herself standing there because she had already decided she was going to make it happen. She drew what she knew. She drew what was going to be. And then she made sure it was. Kang Min Jae had walked out of his office on a Thursday evening and found a 5-year-old in a red dress with both arms out blocking a door. He had crouched to her level. He had said, tell me. She had told him. And he had turned around. Not because he was afraid of what was behind the door. Because he understood that what was in front of the door was worth more than anything that had ever been behind it. A child who had been drawing his life since the first day. A woman who had found a piece of paper in a waste paper basket and folded it and put it in her pocket and walked back down the corridor without showing a single thing on her face. A life that had been drawn before it was lived. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your city and the time it is where you are right now in the comments. Drop a yellow heart for Soleil, who stood in that corridor alone for 29 minutes because she had already drawn herself there. Tell me, when was the last time someone stood in a corridor for you? With both arms out. Not asking to be thanked. Just making sure the door didn't open. Share this video with that person. Because they deserve to know what they did. Subscribe to Afro Korean. Hit like. Share this with every woman who has ever protected something worth protecting without anyone asking her to. Because Soleil drew it on the first day. And she made it true. She always did. And Afro Korean will keep bringing you more. Thank you for watching.